Is if you enjoy the process, you don't care as much about the outcome. She's a doctor of the church. She's coming at it from a very different angle from me. Audiobooks count, and so...
Ooh, I win then.
Yeah, okay.
You're never going to be perfectly happy all the time. The best you can hope for is to be reasonably happy. Reasonably happy. Most of the time. Hello, ladies and gentlemen. Welcome back to another episode of Reasonably Happy. I am your host, Paul Ollinger. I am thrilled to welcome today my guest, Gretchen Rubin. You probably know who she is, but in case you don't, she is the author of several books, including The Happiness Project, Happier at Home, Better Than Before, and The Four Tendencies, among many others. She is also the host of Happier with Gretchen Rubin podcast that you record with your sister.
Yes.
That's such a labor of love.
Yes. Yeah, no, it's really fun. And I'm so happy to be talking to you today. We're interested in so many of the same things.
Thank you for coming in. Let me ask you, as we start every podcast, where do you find yourself, where and when do you find yourself the happiest?
Probably reading in bed. I'm kind of a killjoy type personality, so yeah. And I'll often reread books, so maybe rereading a book that I already know that I love. There's not even any suspense about how much I enjoy the book.
What's the best book you've ever reread?
Oh, I don't know. I love to read, so I couldn't pick. There's a million books of every different kind, so it's like Sophie's Choice. How could I choose? I can't choose.
How many books do you read every year?
A lot. I do read a lot of, and this is one of the mysteries of my life, because I do read a lot of books, but I feel like I'm never reading. I feel like and on the Happier podcast, we have an annual challenge, and this year it's read 25 and 25. So to read for 25 minutes in 2025.
Every day, you mean?
Every day. So trying to have that habit of reading. Because a lot of people, they know they're happier when they're reading, and it just kind of falls out of their schedule. So this is
25 feels achievable.
25 feels achievable. Yeah, and audiobooks count. And so...
Ooh, I win then.
Yeah, okay. But it's like, for a lot of people, they know they're happier when they read, but they just don't make time for it. And so this is a way to help.
This thing makes it harder for us to make the time to read.
So you need to, this is a way to sort of make it part of your life, at least for a year. And I read a lot, and people are like, how do you get so much reading done? But I feel like I'm never reading. I should do some kind of time tracking. I was trained as a lawyer, so the idea of tracking my hours does not appeal to me. But I'm like, when am I?
That seems like it should be right in your DNA, though.
Yeah, when am I reading? I don't know, but I do read a lot. I do get a lot of books read.
Yeah, that's interesting. Okay, when you were 13 years old, what did you want to be when you grew up?
I never think about the future. I never thought about it.
Really?
No. I didn't even think about it when I went to law school. I don't know why. I always just think
Why did you go to law school if you weren't thinking about the future?
Because I didn't know what else to do with myself. I was good at reading and research and writing, and I thought to myself, well, this will keep my options open. It's great training for anything I want to do. I can change my mind later. My father was a lawyer who was very happy, so I had that model. He wasn't pushing me to go to law school, but I had that model. So I went for all the wrong reasons, because I just simply didn't know what to do with myself.
But you didn't go to KU or Kansas State Law School. You went to Yale Law School. So there had to be some preparation.
No, because I'm really good at reading and research and writing. And so I was I'm really good at, if somebody says this is what you need to do, I'm really good at being like, okay, then I will do that thing. And so I was like, I'll get good grades. Then I'll take the LSAT. Oh, I got good LSAT. I'll apply. Oh, I got into Yale Law School. Yale Law School is a really great, fun place to go. So I was like, well, of course I'm going to go to Yale Law School. Then I never thought about the future.
I took the LSAT, and you know what it told me?
What?
Don't go to law school.
But that's good, because
it was good.
I say
it's the second best thing you can learn by taking the LSAT.
Right, exactly. But I always say to people, go to law school if you want to be a lawyer. Don't go to law school because you can't think of what else to do with yourself.
Right. What kind of law did your dad practice?
He had his own firm. He did a lot of stuff. For instance, he did reinsurance, which is like insurance company. He did a lot of stuff with sort of the state,
But he was a happy lawyer, you said.
He really loved it. Yeah, he really loved it.
And a lot of lawyers, especially later in their career, this is hard for me to keep doing.
But so, you know why that is? I think it's because a lot of people go to law school, like me, not because they want to go to law school, and so they end up doing it, and then they don't like it. It's like sound engineers. People don't become sound engineers because they can't think of anything else to do with themselves. The people who become sound engineers are interested in being sound engineers. only the people who are interested in it do it. And so, but a lot of people who aren't particularly interested in law end up going into law. And so then a lot of them, it's not a good fit.
Right.
So you should do it if it's the right choice for you. I know many people who are extremely happy lawyers.
My high school counselor said, "Oh, you should be a corporate lawyer because you're a good student and you're interested in being successful. That's what you should go
And you're
do."
a really good talker, right?
Yes.
Right?
Thank
You're
you.
very persuasive. Like you're probably very.
I have confidence, even if it's not accurate.
Well,
it's confident.
So I mean, it's right. So you could have been a good corporate lawyer if that's what you wanted to do.
Right.
Like you had a skill set.
What does an 18-year-old know about what a corporate lawyer does?
I mean, did you even know what that was? Like I was in law school before I understood the difference between like a litigator and a corporate lawyer.
Right.
Like I didn't know.
Or an estate planning attorney.
No, I knew what none of that was. You know, I had no idea.
Yeah.
I had no idea.
How old were you when you figured out that you liked gold stars?
Oh, 4, probably.
4?
Or 2.
Yeah.
No, I'm a person who always really likes positive reinforcement.
Positive reinforcement.
Yes. How about you? Do you care about gold stars?
Oh my God.
Yeah.
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 I remember in high school going to check the dean's list when it came out because I knew if my name was on that list that I was okay, that I was doing the things I was supposed to be doing. And it was like, okay. And then if I'm the captain of the football team and the lead role in the play and I'm in student council, I'm doing all these things, which I think I'm one of 6 kids, probably an attempt to stand out and make myself, to self-soothe with achievement, which was something that I read, as I read The Happiness Project. I'm like, I think we have some of these things in common.
Yeah. It's a lot of people who love their gold stars.
So have the gold stars in your life, do you still seek them? Do they still provide you
of course.
with soothing?
No, and it's funny because everybody knows that about me. Like I literally got a note from a friend and she said, "Gretchen, you get all the stars." And I was like, I want all the stars. Or another friend of mine gave me like a little, I love for some reason a little glass jar with a cork stopper. And she gave me that and it was filled with like little, like I don't know, they're gold stars, but they're like an object. They're not a sticker. They're just like little objects. And it was like, open it in case of emergency type thing. So it's become a big joke. Yes.
But you literally, so for people that don't know you, and I knew who you were, and I had your book on my shelf for years because I was like, some point I'm going to interview Gretchen, but I'm going to read it right before.
Here it is. You manifested it.
So your resume is ridiculous. You were the editor-in-chief of the Yale Law Review. You clerked for Sandra Day O'Connor. Your books have sold millions of copies. Your podcast is hugely popular. You've met Oprah, the Dalai Lama. All these are gold stars.
Yeah, no, and I love them all.
Do you appreciate them as they're happening?
Yeah, I think so. Yes, absolutely. Yeah.
Do you feel successful?
Yeah. Well, so here's the thing. So my father, who's a very happy person in general, one of the mantras that he always repeated over and over to my sister and me, and it's so true, and it's one of my sort of like my 12, my personal commandments of happiness is to enjoy the process. Because the fact is, if you enjoy the process, you don't care as much about the outcome. Still, you might really want to have a positive outcome, but if you enjoy the process, if it doesn't work out the way you want, it's not as bitter. So, for instance, like I wrote a book called 40 Ways to Look at JFK, and I loved writing that book. But when a book flops in publishing, what they tell you, what your editor says to you is, your book didn't find its audience. And that means nobody bought your book. So that book did not find its audience, but I loved writing that book. And I still remember it so fondly. I think of things that I learned and that I read and insights that I got writing it. I don't regret it at all because I enjoyed the process so much. Of course, I was disappointed that it didn't find its audience. But if I had written a book because somebody said, like, if you're like, okay, Gretchen, I'm telling you, this is what the audience wants. Maybe you're not interested, but if you write this book, it's going to be a bestseller. And I write it, and it's really boring, and I force myself to do it. But I'm like, okay, I'll do anything I can to succeed. And then the book flops. Well, then I'm hugely disappointed, and I've had this, bad experience
because you compromised yourself.
Well, I'm just doing something I don't enjoy. Like I'm not doing it for my own reasons. I'm only doing it for the outcome. So then, if I don't get the outcome, then I've got nothing. Whereas if you enjoy the process, you're like, well, I had the experience of doing it.
Totally.
And, so because especially when you do a lot of creative things, some things work, a lot of things don't work. If you're doing something that you enjoy, well, then you feel like you're gaining something from it, like you're learning something, even things that fail teach you something. Whereas if you're forcing yourself to do something just because you want the outcome, then it's so bitter if it doesn't go your way, as it so often doesn't.
I've been doing, after my corporate life, I've been pursuing stand-up comedy for 10 years and writing and things like that. And what I've learned is that the only reward you get is the answer to the question, what would happen if I gave it my all?
Yeah.
That's it.
Yes.
And that has to be enough.
Yes.
Because there's nothing else. Even if you get the dream gig, even if you're host the Tonight Show for 5 years, it's going to end.
Yes. Yes.
And so the process has to be enough.
Well, and I had that moment when I was thinking about like switching to writing, and I thought to myself, well, at this point, I'd rather fail as a writer than succeed as a lawyer. I have to give it a shot. I have to succeed or fail. I have to try, because I don't want to be haunted by the feeling of like, well, what if I had tried? What if I had given it my all? Right. What would have happened? I didn't want to have that kind of regret. That's a kind of regret. There's if only regret, which is if only I had done it. And often people are more likely to regret things they didn't do. Mm-hmm. But then there's also kind of at least. Like, I had a bad divorce, but at least I have my 3 children who I love or whatever. So you don't want to have an if only.
Well, it depends on which deathbed regret you're trying to minimize. Mm-hmm. You know, I mean, and for me it was, I don't want to regret not having tried.
Not having tried, yes.
And so... And I'm being rewarded with that very thing. Right. And this conversation is evidence of that. Yeah. Well, you never know.
You never know.
One of the things that resonated with me was your rule in the Happiness Project, Be Gretchen. Mm-hmm. Tell me more about Be Gretchen.
Well, feel free to substitute the name Paul for yourself.
I was not trying to be Gretchen, but the attempt, the desire to be authentically oneself, fully and present on a daily basis.
It's so hard.
Really resonates.
Why is it so hard? You think, of course I'm myself. I know myself. I just hang out with myself all day long. But
that could be self-reinforcing.
But it's very
echo chamber.
No, because I think it's hard because there's this tension. And it's funny, I have a little book that's coming out called Secrets of Adulthood, which is just sort of like these little secrets of adulthood that I've learned. And one of the most important secrets of adulthood is that we want to accept ourselves and also expect more from ourselves. And that is a tension that can never be resolved, and no one can solve it for us. Because if you, like with you, if you're like, okay, I'm going to get up and do stand-up. It probably was really uncomfortable at the beginning, but you were like, I'm going to expect this of myself. I'm going to do this. Where for somebody else, it's like, that's just not within the natural bounds of their nature. That wouldn't fit them. Like to tell them, oh, well, you ought to do it. It's like, well, they have to figure out how to push themselves outside their comfort zone, but also accept the natural boundaries, because we all have natural boundaries and natural limitations. And I find it very annoying. Sometimes I'll just say to somebody something like, well, that's not for me. And they'll be like, oh, but you could do it if you wanted. And I'm like, but that's just not for me.
Just because you have the capacity to do something doesn't mean it's something that's an expression of who you are.
Right. Like I remember somebody, and I was talking about how there's sort of an element of sadness in being yourself and recognizing yourself, because then there's things that you are and then there are things that you aren't. And so I had commented that I was sad that I was never the kind of person who would go to a jazz club at midnight. and somebody said to me, but Gretchen, you live in New York City. You could totally go to a jazz club in New York at midnight. And I said, you don't understand my point. The thing is, I don't want to go to a jazz club at midnight.
Do you want to go to a matinee at a jazz club?
No, I don't want to do that either. Yeah. And it's not for me.
Yeah.
And there's nothing wrong with that. Yeah. You know what I mean? Now, if I became interested in it, I could become a person. Mm-hmm. But like, I don't want to waste my time, feeling bad about all the things that I'm not.
Okay, so my super fan sister Claire.
Thank you, Claire. I appreciate the enthusiasm for sure.
She told me today that one of your goals for this year is to know more about the New York Knicks.
Operation Knicks knowledge. Thank you, Claire. She's following my journey.
That's right. So
ask me about Kat.
Is that a genuine interest of yours, or is that an attempt to be closer to the people you love?
Okay, so that is a really interesting question. So what I wanted to figure out was, can you make yourself become interested in something? Can you just decide by sheer force of will to take interest in something? And what I found is that it really does help if there is somebody there who has an enthusiasm, who can be your guide and who's like excited that you're excited, and I have that. My husband Jamie, like he loves the Knicks. He's so excited, and he's really excited that I'm interested. Like so it is absolutely 100% true that I have an on-ramp with him. And I said to him, and so I'll go to him and ask him questions like, well, when they talk about transition, what is that? Because I thought, is it to transition from the bench to being a player, or is it? And he's like, no, it's the transition from offense to defense. I'm like, okay, because sometimes listening to the commentators, I'm like, what are they even taught? I can't. There's so much vocabulary that I don't understand.
Sure.
But I love a steep learning curve. So for me, it's really fun. Like I just read an article in the paper today about, Thibodeau and Karl Anthony Towns and how are they getting along? And I'm like, I actually have a view of Karl Anthony Towns. And so it is really, really fun. And one of the things that's great about sports, just generally sort of from a happiness perspective, sports is a great thing because a lot of people are interested in it. And so it allows you to have genial small talk with a stranger in a way that you feel like you're sort of connecting, but it's easy, and people sometimes dismiss small talk as insignificant, but you can't have deep talk until you have small talk. And sometimes we just need to show that our friendliness to somebody.
Yeah.
And by the way, I mean, I don't know about other teams. I'd be curious to know about, but if you go to Madison Square Garden, the New York City spirit there is so high. It brings all of New York City together. It's just like a super, like, New York, it's New York or nowhere, like New York forever. And I love that. I mean, I'm from Kansas City, Missouri. I love Kansas City, Missouri. Love New York City. And there really is something so just exciting and really uplifting and just like makes you feel a love of humanity, of everybody.
I'd love to see Gretchen Rubin rolling up on some dude on the subway with a post tucked under his arm, talking about the Knicks.
Yeah. No, I mean, I really am enjoying it.
So you can be yourself while exploring new interests that aren't necessarily innate in you.
Yeah, core. Yeah. Now,
interesting.
Yeah. Could I, from a standing stop, get interested in cricket with nobody in my life? I don't know. I think maybe I could. I think because the more we know, the more we notice. And with more knowledge, we have more curiosity. And I think once you start paying attention to something, you tend to start having views and opinions. And you want to know, well, what does everybody else think? Like, I'm like, what's up with, like, speaking of Karl Anthony Towns, I'm like, that guy lumbers. Like, you think of like someone like Tiger Woods and he's this elegant, usually great athletes look so effortless. I'm like, that guy does not make it look effortless.
Right.
And yet he's great. So, but I'm like, what do other people think of Karl Anthony Towns? So the more you get into it.
My son is a big soccer fan, and it's a thing he's taken on in the last 3 years.
Yeah.
And so it is fun. I'll sit down and watch the games with him. When we were in Munich this summer, we went to the Bayern Munich Stadium.
Well, yes.
And just like,
it gives you a reason to go someplace, have an adventure with somebody, share an experience.
Yeah. Yeah. It's cool.
And that's one of the things that's exciting about other people is if you can gain that kind of interest from them, then you feel like your own life has become enlarged.
Yeah. Yeah. And I'm not a huge sport. I played sports as a kid, but I've lost the passion for professional sport. I love golf, but it's cool to sort of have some conversational flow and watch him develop around that sport too.
No.
It's cool.
And it's fun to share it.
All right, I want to stay on the Be Gretchen thing, and we'll come to Be Paul, and then we'll talk about what we talked about prior. One of the things I wrote down that I thought was really cool, and where is this? It's about, whatever it is you admire in others is something that is nascent in yourself that you have not yet brought into being.
I didn't say that. I must have been quoting somebody.
You wrote this in The Happiness Project. Now, you might have been quoting somebody.
I think I'm quoting. I'll go home and look it up, but that doesn't sound like my writing. But I think it's an interesting idea.
Well, I pulled it from your book. Now, maybe I didn't credit the quote. Anyway, what I thought was interesting about that is like, so we're looking out to other people to discover ways to be ourselves.
Exactly. Yes, that's better put. Yeah.
Well, now that you didn't.
But then there's
this.
Also Jung who said more or less everything that irritates us about others also reveals something about ourselves. So no, that's part of how we understand ourselves. Is people talk about social comparison as if it's always bad, but there's something really helpful about social comparison, which is how we how do you know you're funny? Because you're like, wow, people seem to think I'm funnier than other people. Now you know something about yourself.
And that really is what it's about. It's not about being funny in the absolute. It's about being better than the other person.
Well, I mean, if
As
you're
Steve
going to
Martin
stand
said-
up and do it.
As Steve Martin said at the Mark Twain Award, it's not about who's gotten this, it's about who's not gotten this award.
Yeah, that's a very Mark Twain idea. Yeah.
Well, I just thought that was interesting. I started to think about, okay, well, who do I admire? And creatively, I was thinking about Anthony Bourdain. And
Are you a foodie?
well, I like food. I'm not like a hugely adventurous foodie. I did eat camel in Morocco over Christmas,
Okay.
which may or may not
Like
have
chicken?
resulted in me. No, it was good. It was good. It may have resulted in me sleeping for the next 3 days. But no, I was thinking like, okay, I wish I was a little cooler, maybe a little less inhibited. Obviously, I don't want the whole package that Bourdain was dealing with.
Right.
But there's elements of his personality that I'd like to, I guess, develop more in my own.
Yeah.
Who do you admire? Sister Saint Therese.
Well, yeah, that's a little obscure. I wasn't gonna go there. I was gonna say Julia
The little
Child.
flower. Okay, Julia Child.
Okay. Well, what I love about Julia Child is like her enthusiasm. Like she was so enthusiastic about French cooking that she carried the whole, and kind of like Anthony Bourdain, she carried the whole country with her just because she was so enraptured with something that that everyone else began to feel it. Saint Therese of Lisieux is my spiritual teacher, and she is, I'm not even Catholic, but she's a doctor of the church, which means she's not just a saint, she's
like
a
a
super
super-
saint.
yeah,
She's a
right.
super saint. She died in her early 20s from tuberculosis, but she wrote this memoir called Story of a Soul, which I've read it at least 15 times. I have this huge collection of biographies of her, which are short because she didn't live very long. So I think about Saint Therese all the time. She was very funny too, which you don't think that a saint is going to be funny, but she had a real sense of humor.
What if we accept the quote that I read as true? What aspects of her personality would you like to develop more in your own?
Well, she's called the little flower, which you just mentioned, and that's because she considered herself a little flower. So there are the great roses and lilies, but she was a little flower, like a violet. And her greatness comes from her ability to have great virtue in small things. So she said she wanted to be a martyr, she wanted to be a missionary, but she wasn't. So it's to do great things in kind of your ordinary life. So she represents to me this idea of like, just in your ordinary life, without spending a lot of time, energy, or money, without doing something that seems extraordinary, you can really elevate through attention and love.
Well, don't you think that's kind of what you're doing with your work?
Well, yeah, no, that's exactly what that's why she speaks to me so much, because I'm very interested in that.
You're not a bombastic person.
Well, but I'm also not now take 6 months and go on a silent meditation retreat, or now do the Appalachian Trail. I love reading about people who do that. I think it's super fun and exciting, but it's not for me. It wouldn't suit me or my life. Yeah.
In chapter 1 of Bill Bryson's Walk to the Woods,
Yes.
I was like, I'm going to walk the Appalachian Trail. And by chapter 3, I'm like, no way I'm ever going to do that.
The thing I respected about Bill Bryson is he's writing a book about it. He's like, you know what? I'm just not going to finish. And I'm like, even a book contract could not get that guy to go all
Hilarious.
the way. Yeah. Yeah.
Okay, be Gretchen. Now, we were talking before we started taping that one of the things I found myself thinking in my early 40s as I was considering career changes is like, I just want to be me. I want to bring myself to everything that I do. And it led me to try to live a more creative life.
Right.
And when I said that, you wanted to profile me.
Yeah, yes, I did. I wanted to slot you into a category.
Put me in a category,
yes.
Gretchen.
Okay, so can I explain? I'm going to explain the categories.
Please.
Okay, so this is, they say there are two categories of people: the kind of people who like to divide people into categories, and the kind of people who don't. I'm the kind of people who does. So this divides people into upholders, questioners, obligers, and rebels.
The Four Tendencies.
These are the four tendencies, and I'm going to describe them briefly. And people can go online and take a very free, quick quiz at GretchenRubin.com/quiz. Like 3.5 million people have taken this quiz, and it will give you an answer in sort of a report. But I'm going to describe them.
It takes 3 minutes.
It takes 3 minutes. Okay, so you've done it. Okay, good. We'll have to see if I peg you. But I'll just describe them, and most people know what they are. They know what their friends and family and coworkers are. We could do the Game of Thrones characters. We could do the Office characters. These are very obvious once you know what you're looking for. Okay, so what it's looking at is this very narrow aspect of your nature, but it's a very significant aspect, which is how you respond to expectations. So outer expectation, and we all face two kinds, outer and inner expectations. Outer expectations are things like a work deadline. Inner expectations are like your desire to keep a New Year's resolution, like getting back into meditation. So depending on whether you meet expectations or resist expectations, outer and inner, that's what makes you an upholder, questioner, blighter, rebel. So upholders readily meet outer and inner expectations. So they keep the work deadline, they meet the New Year's resolution without much fuss. They can sometimes be rigid, but they're very good at sort of self-starting. They don't need a lot of accountability or supervision. What other people expect from them is very important, but what they expect from themselves is just as important. So their motto is, discipline is my freedom. That's my tendency.
That's yours.
I'm an upholder. Then there are questioners. Questioners question all expectations. They'll do something if they think it makes sense. So they're always asking for justifications, reasons. So they're turning everything into an inner expectation because they'll do it if it makes sense to them, but they'll push back if it doesn't make sense. So they resist anything arbitrary. They have to know why. And sometimes they can even fall into analysis paralysis because it's hard for them to move forward if they don't have perfect information. And a lot of times we don't have perfect information. So
Like all the time.
Not all the time. So their motto is, I'll comply if you convince me why. Then there are obligers. This is the biggest tendency for both men and women. You either are an obliger or you have many obligers in your life. Obligers readily meet outer expectations, but they struggle to meet inner expectations. So these are the people who say, why is it that I never let down anybody at work, but I let down myself? I keep my promises to everybody else, but I can't keep my promises to myself. So what they're doing is if they will meet an outer expectation, but they struggle to meet inner expectations. So the answer for them is outer accountability. They have to have outer accountability even to meet an inner expectation. You want to work out more, you have to work out with a trainer or take a class or think about how disappointed your dog will be if she doesn't get to go for a run, or you raise money for a charity or whatever it is. And they're great leaders, followers, friends, family members, because they're the people that are most likely to go the extra mile, but they really have trouble managing themselves. So their motto is, you can count on me, and I'm counting on you to count on me. And then finally, rebels. Rebel is the smallest tendency. It's a conspicuous tendency, but it's a small tendency. And upholders only slightly larger than upholders. Most people are obligers or questioners. So rebels resist all expectations, outer and inner alike. They want to do what they want to do in their own way, in their own time. They can do anything they want to do, anything they choose to do. But if you ask or tell them to do something, they're very likely to resist. And typically they don't tell themselves what to do. Like they don't sign up for a 10 a.m. woodworking class on Saturday because they think, I don't know what I'm going to want to do on Saturday, and the fact that somebody's expecting me to show up is just going to annoy me. So their motto is, you can't make me, and neither can I.
Oh, interesting.
Yeah. So when you said that about your experience at Facebook, it made me wonder about your tendency, but you didn't say enough for me to try to do a flash diagnosis. So can I ask a few follow-up questions?
Absolutely.
Okay. And try to answer, well, you've taken the quiz, so, but anyway, try to answer authentically. You and I are in a coffee shop, and we're in the back. There's nobody there. There's like the wait services in the front. And so we've got the place to ourselves. And there's a big sign right next to us that says, absolutely no cell phone use. And I pull out my cell phone and start using it. How do you feel about what I'm doing?
I'm uncomfortable.
Why are you uncomfortable?
Because you are breaking a social norm. You're not breaking a social norm. Well, in that environment, you're breaking a social norm. And it puts me in the position of either having to correct you or ignore it.
Okay. All right. That narrows it down somewhat. Okay, let's see. What would the next question be? Do you find that if you're trying to get something done, does it really help you to have someone else counting on you, or it doesn't really matter to you if someone else is counting on you?
I think I respond to direction and to outer accountability sometimes, yes.
Okay, so I'm thinking that you're an obliger.
as you described it, I would have maybe put myself in that category. But from your online quiz, I'm a rebel.
Well, see, that's interesting because obligers and rebels, they overlap. So they have a lot in common.
That's that Venn diagram.
Yeah, it's a Venn diagram.
Okay.
So obligers and rebels, they overlap. So, and it can be sometimes hard, but when you were at Facebook, how did you feel about all the rules?
Well, it was a place where rules were emerging because it was a very young company that was growing extremely quickly.
Oh, interesting.
And so there was a great deal of office politics. As processes were put into place, these were new things we had to deal with and adapt.
And did you find...
And there were I'm sorry to interrupt, but there were cultural norms that emanated from the youth of the company. And what I mean, we had a 22-year-old founder.
Yeah.
And the engineers sort of set the culture, which grew outward. And I was on the sales team, and I was of a different generation. So there was a palpable sense of not necessarily being in the core group there. I don't know if that makes if that has any relevance to this quiz, but
not to this quiz, but I'm just trying to figure out. I think you're probably an obliger, partly because the obliger is a very large category and rebel is a very small category, and so that's just statistically more likely.
Anthony Bourdain.
But and also I think if you were a rebel, you would know you were a rebel. Like I'll tell you, like I know somebody who works at Meta now, who's a rebel, and I said, how do you deal with all the rules? Now, of course, he's there now, so it's completely solidified in a way that it's not at all because you were there so early. But he said, but I mean, that's a question. How does a rebel, because often rebels, interestingly, do really well in the military, the police, and the clergy, which you would think is surprising. And I said, so how do you do it? And he goes, well, the thing of it is, I want to start my own company. So I'm here learning. I'm working for them, but they're teaching me. I'm getting everything I want. I'm getting this education for free. I'm taking notes. And then when I start my own thing, it'll be I'll be a big success. And so he saw it as like, you're working for me.
Right.
And paying me. Like, I'm getting this great training. So that's how he did his rebel. But you were there at an early time, so it's kind of hard because that might be really fun. Sometimes rebels are attracted to kind of emergent situations like that because it's like, there are no rules, and so they feel it's very unconstrained. And then once something like becomes more constrained, then they feel cramped by that, which is why I asked that question of you.
It was relatively chaotic.
So that might appeal to a rebel.
Yeah, I like order.
I think you're an obliger.
Yeah.
And by the way, sometimes people think they don't, like all these tendencies, some people are like, well, I don't want to be that, I want to be another one. There's so many of the most hugely successful people are obligers. Tiger Woods an obliger, Oprah's an obliger. Andre Agassi's an obliger. I don't know why I'm thinking of all these sports people. Diana was an obliger.
Let's break down the New York Knicks. Where are they?
Oh, I don't know. They don't talk
enough. You should put them through all that.
Well, I will tell you who is one.
That'd be a great article for the Times.
But the fact is, it's really hard. Like I've been trying to figure out Barack Obama.
Yeah.
But you can't look at what someone does to know their tendency. You have to understand what they're thinking.
Really?
And so you have to have insight into their thought process. And so if they're like Andre Agassi wrote a memoir, Open, which is an amazing memoir, and he's textbook obliger. I could literally like have a checklist and be like, check, 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 check. But if people are more cagey, like Barack Obama, I think is cagey, or if there's just not that much, like the Knicks just don't give, they're not giving hour-long interviews into their inner psychic process or writing huge memoirs. So I don't have access to the way that they think. And also for a lot of celebrities, they're giving us a very they might not be.
It's a skewed version.
It's a skewed version. It's a version that they want to. It took me forever. I had to read a dozen biographies and interviews and things about Diana to get a sense, and then I really felt confident. Okay, this is an obliger, but then like something like Game of Thrones, it's so obvious what almost every character is. It's hilarious to me. Yeah. And also, what's interesting about Game of Thrones is like with all of these tendencies, it can look good or it can look bad. There's the good and bad version of either. And what's interesting about Game of Thrones is like you have good and bad versions. Like Cersei is a rebel, and Arya is a rebel. And even, or I don't know if you know Game of Thrones, so I won't go into it.
I watched every episode that I've kind of, I'm having to remember who's who.
But Cersei's father literally says to Arya, "You remind me of my daughter," because they're both rebels. But one is, we would say is a good expression, and one is a negative expression. But they're both rebels.
Given all the, I interviewed Kim Scott.
She's an old friend of mine.
Is she really?
Yes, we work together.
She's fantastic.
She is.
Do
you know that she wears an orange sweater and jeans and boots or running shoes at all times?
I did not know that.
I know her tendency for sure. Can you? She's a rebel. She's one of my OG rebels. Yes.
Well, all these different personalities and the organizations where a lot of us work or worked beg the question, can you bring your whole self to work?
Well, there's so many layers to that. Mm-hmm. I would say no. I don't think we would want to bring our whole selves to work.
So we're wearing masks then or we're suppressing some parts of ourselves?
No, it's just like not everything is appropriate for all audiences. Mm-hmm. Yeah. I don't think that there's anything. So
if you're of a personality type that doesn't necessarily fit with the environment you're in,
that's something different.
Okay.
That's something different. I thought you meant by bring your whole self to work. Like, are you disclosing everything? I'm talking about my personal life, my feelings about my parents, like my religious, religious beliefs. Let's let it all hang out.
It's a relevant question in an increasingly politicized workplace over the last 5 to 10 years to say, and I'm not trying to make this a political conversation. I'm just saying, like, to what degree to having to keep your mouth shut at work leads to unhappiness?
Well, I think there's just politeness and there's also privacy. Mm-hmm. It's a lot to handle if somebody is just like dropping big disclosures from their life, and then you have to manage that. I don't know. I think this is not something that I think about a lot. So I don't want to get over my skis here,
right,
because that's not the way that I think about it. I think that there's a lot of, I think just politeness dictates that there's some things that we just don't expect other people to talk about.
Right.
Or that it's not appropriate for why we're coming together.
Well, I think what those topics are is open to question.
Sure.
There's a lot of people who are religious, for example, and that's a huge part of their identity, who haven't felt comfortable, being that person in the workplace in the last few years. And again, not to make it, here's the reason why I ask. Because you talk about basically faking it till you make it, to adapt happiness practices, to smile even when you don't feel happy.
That's the psychological principle that we think that actions follow feelings, but to a great degree, feelings follow actions. And so that if you want to change your emotional state, it's by changing your conscious thoughts and actions. That's often a good way to get into your emotional state. So if you're feeling tired, if you act with energy, you're going to start to feel more energetic. Or if you're feeling shy, if you push yourself to act friendly, you'll feel more friendly. Mm-hmm. That's fake it till you feel it. That's not like be inauthentic and present a totally imposter false sense to the world, and then that somehow will become your truth. That's more about how do you, when people want to change their own emotional state, when they're not, they're like, I don't want to feel this way.
Right.
It's like, okay, I have to stand up in front of an audience and I don't feel like doing it. It's like, okay, well, stand up straighter, act with more energy, like command the room. Like that's going to help you feel more.
That requires a great degree of self-awareness and willpower.
Back to our original thing, self-awareness, self-knowledge. It's so hard. Yeah.
Now, so if I read studies that say that religious people are happier and live longer.
Well, that's very mixed.
Should I choose to be religious?
That's very mixed.
Oh, so that data isn't clear.
Well, it depends on the religion. It depends on the beliefs. There's a lot going on in that.
Okay, so I should pick the religion that lives the longest and makes people happiest.
Well, I don't think most people choose religion for those purposes.
Well, Pascal had Pascal's wager, right? Where he basically said, I choose to believe in God because the math says I should. Yeah. Right? Because the pain of hell is an incalculably large cost that I would have to pay. So I choose to believe in God. Can you choose a belief because you think it will make you happier?
I mean, that's that. Now we're going into like deep faith, and that's again like.
Okay,
What would Saint Therese do?
What would Saint Therese do? What would Saint Therese do? What would Saint Therese do? What would Saint Therese do? What would Saint Therese do? What would Saint Therese do? What would Saint Therese do? What would Saint Therese do? What would Saint Therese do? What would Saint Therese do? What would Saint Therese do? What would Saint Therese do? What would Saint Therese do? What would Saint Therese do? What would Saint Therese do? What would Saint Therese do? What would Saint Therese do? What would Saint Therese do? What would Saint Therese do? What would Saint Therese do? What would Saint Therese do? What would Saint Therese do? What would Saint Therese do? What would Saint Therese do? What would Saint Therese do? What would Saint Therese do? What would Saint Therese do
Well, that's one of the things. If this is an interesting question to you, I commend to you Story of a Soul, her spiritual memoir, because she gets way, way, way deep into these matters of belief, disbelief, loss of faith. What does it mean? What does it truly mean to be an object of God's love in a way that is very unusual? So it will blow your mind. It's not for everyone. Right. I'm just saying, but it's a fascinating and beautiful book. But she's a doctor of the church. She's coming at it from a very different angle from me.
An OG, right?
Yeah.
Okay, something you do have experience with. Yeah. We all have experience with it on some level, but you actually had lunch with Daniel Kahneman, the late great Daniel Kahneman, who has co-authored a paper, and I interviewed the other co-author, Sir Angus Deaton, a very famous work about money and happiness. What do you, and for quick summary, they found back in 2010 that there was no additional happiness after $75,000 a year.
No, that's not.
It's been debunked.
Yes, it has been. But can I just say,
Killingsworth, please.
Okay, we don't need a study to tell us that is not true.
Great, let's hear it.
We know that is not true.
What do you mean?
We know that it is preposterous to say that at $75,000, there's absolutely no difference, because people are different and people's demands are different and people's lives are different. Some people have 8 children, some people have no children, some people have health problems, some people don't, some people live in New York City, some people live in, I mean, it's just, that's just that. I just looked at that and I was like, this is going to be debunked, because that's just not true. You just can't say that. I mean,
what do you think the connection between money and is there a linear correlation, or is there any correlation?
It's not linear, but there is a correlation, and more. But also the thing to remember is, like, money may not buy happiness, but it buys many things that do contribute mightily to happiness. So, for instance,
or eliminate unhappiness.
Exactly, right? A lot of it, and that's an excellent point. In some ways, money is like health, where if you have it, you never think about it, but if you don't have it, it's really going to pull you down.
You're thinking about it before you brush your teeth.
So the lack of it will pull you down very much, and but having it is very easy to take it for granted. But also, like, money buys things like control, and when we look at what makes people happy, having control over your time, for instance, right? Like, not having to get on a bus at 8:05 every day, and if you're 1 minute late, you're going to be late to work, and you're going to get, it's having control. So money buys control. Money allows us to support the people and causes that we believe in. It allows us to, like, work on our health by, like, going to the doctor, belonging to a gym, buying healthier food. It lets us. And then also, it's another thing that people talk about a lot is the difference between experiences and things. And they're like, for happiness, invest in experiences, not things. Okay, but the line between experiences and things is often very blurry. So, like, is a dog an experience or a thing?
Oh, it's a negative annuity.
Is buying a pair of skis an experience or a thing? My sister bought she was so happy when she finally made enough money that she could buy a dining room table. Now, it wasn't that the dining room table, but she's super social, and she's like, now I can have people over for dinner. Is that an experience or a thing? And buying podcast equipment, right? It's a thing, but it's also an experience. And so there's definitely things that people can spend their money on that will not make them happier or will actually add to their unhappiness.
Like what?
Like high-stakes gambling or cocaine, right?
Yeah.
But then there's things where it probably will make you happier. Like anything, relationships are probably the key to happiness. So, like, let's say you're thinking, should I spend the money and fly across the country to visit my sibling? Yeah, that's probably going to make you happier. Should I spring to go to my college reunion? Yeah, it's probably going to make you happier. So I think money spent wisely can do a lot to make us happier. And one of the most precious things that money can buy, as you pointed out, is the freedom from having to worry about money. So that's something money buys. But that's not to say that people don't make foolish choices that ultimately contribute to their unhappiness.
But I think it calls into question too. It's people throw money at their definition of happiness, and that might be they think it's some gold Rolex or it's a big.
So here's the thing: do you think people do that much? People are always talking about people doing that. I'm like, they don't do it.
You mean consciously do it?
I mean, I think these things represent something else to the person doing them.
Well, they buy it because I think, whether they're conscious of it or not, they're buying something because they think it's going to put them in a position of higher status, which will equal some degree of happiness.
Well, status does make people happier. That's true.
It does.
Yeah.
Until they realize that, having a Rolex and nothing in the bank is just a perpetuation of
that's a foolish choice.
Of that financial instability that
Right.
really is the source of so much pain.
Right. That's a foolish choice.
So what I'm wondering is if you had to, think about happiness as a spectrum of different ideas, like the thesaurus of happiness, from jubilation to contentment. And I'm asking the woman who defines happiness as reading in bed at night, which sounds the coziest thing in the world, right? Like how would you encourage people to think about what money can attain for them happiness-wise and what it can't?
Well, it can be really confusing to think about happiness, I think, because it's everything feels jumbled up with everything else. So here's a way to, I think, makes it clear to even think about how to think about it. And then you can sort of slot money into that. So I think that if you're thinking about how to make your life happier, you should think about feeling good, feeling bad, and feeling right in an atmosphere of growth. So you want to think about feeling good. So you want all the things that are good, like enthusiasm, friendship, physical health, energy. You're like, I want more of those things. Then you want to think of the things that make you feel bad. So that's envy, anger, resentment, boredom, frustration. So you're like, how can I have less of that? Then there's feeling right. So feeling right is the feeling that you get when your life reflects your values. And the fact is, sometimes we do things that make us feel right that don't make us feel good. So like maybe you're going to the hospital to visit your father who you were never close to and don't really enjoy. And so you don't look forward to it. You don't enjoy it when you're there. You dread going again. And you're like, but he's still my father. And the right thing to do is to go visit him in the hospital. That's because you're living up to your value. So, or like one of the things people often say in the happiness and money research is they're like, look at all these people. Everybody knows that a commute really will drag you down in happiness. You never adjust to a commute, but all these people, silly them. They live far out of town and they have these long commutes. And why do they do that? Just because they want to.
Before podcasting.
No. Because they have these big fancy houses because they want to impress their friends. No, those people live out there because they want a certain life for their children. They want the right school district. They want to have a backyard. And so they say, I know I'm not going to enjoy that commute. It's going to make me feel bad to have that long commute, but it's going to make me feel right because this is the kind of parent that I want to be. This is the kind of values that I uphold. Now, you could say that's the wrong decision to make, but that's the thinking, I think, for a lot of people in that situation. So there's feeling good, feeling bad, and feeling right. And then an atmosphere of growth. An atmosphere of growth is the feeling, and I think this might have been what you were feeling at Facebook, which is you want to feel like you're growing. We want to feel like we're making progress, we're fixing things, we're learning things, we're gaining skills, we're putting something into the world, maybe teaching. And so sometimes even when you're feeling really bad, you can still have an atmosphere of growth. And an atmosphere of growth often makes you feel bad. It's frustrating. It can make you feel, it can be painful. It can make you feel insecure. You can feel frustrated because you're trying to do something and you're just not good at it and it's really hard. But it brings us this feeling. It's very energizing, but we're just happier when we feel like we're growing. So then you think, okay, feeling good, feeling bad, feeling right, and atmosphere of growth. How could I plug money into that? Okay, so feeling good, it's like, you know what? I really love my college friends, but we never get together. So you know what? I'm going to say this year, I'm going to spend the money. I'm going to go to visit each one of them in 3 different cities. So I'm spending my money to feel good through relationships. Feeling bad, it's like, gosh, one thing that is just so incredibly boring to me is to clean my house every week. So I'm going to use money. I'm going to have a house cleaner come once a week, and that's going to save me. So that's
totally.
Yeah. Then,
outsource the drudgery.
Then feeling right. It's like, I'm going to give money. I really believe that voter registration is an incredibly important thing. I'm going to find 3 organizations that are tackling voter registration in 3 different ways. I'm going to give money to each of them because I want to support this cause. Or my niece is really struggling and my sister can't pay for a tutor, so I'm going to pay for the tutor because this would really help her in her school. So I'm going to fix that for them. And then an atmosphere of growth. Maybe it's like, maybe I'll get some podcasting equipment and start a podcast. Or like I'm trying to learn how to watercolor. So I bought, I went to the art supply store and bought my art supplies. And because or Operation Knicks Knowledge, like I'm trying to, how can I have an atmosphere of growth? This is one of the reasons that parenthood makes people happier. It's like we see that our children are growing and we're contributing to that. We're teaching, we're protecting. We see them growing, we're growing with them, just like now you're interested in the soccer team because your son was interested in the soccer team. So how would I spend my money that would contribute to an atmosphere of growth? So that's how I would plug it into, if I'm like, how can I use money to make my life happier? But you could do the same thing, like, how can I use relationships to make my life happier? How could I use physical health to make my life happier? You could do that in a lot of different ways.
Fantastic. Happiness is growth is one of the things I underlined.
Oh, good.
Put a bunch of exclamation points.
Great.
Oh, we're running out of time. This has been so much fun. Thank you for doing it. I have a few other things to talk about. One, a question for my sister Claire. Thank you for
Thank you, Claire.
What haven't you done that you would like to do?
Oh, I want to get over my fear of driving. I know how to drive, but I'm a very fearful driver.
You're from Kansas.
I know, I am. But now I live in New York City and I don't drive that much. And I've always been kind of a fearful driver. And the less you drive, like the more, because
my wife
when you
is
do
the same way.
Really?
Yes.
Yeah.
We have a car in the city and she hasn't driven it yet.
Well, New York City is scary driving, but
it's like a video game.
I know, but the traffic, I don't know. But I have made a couple of attempts of this as an adult to get over this fear, and I really would like to become less fearful of a driver.
That's good. Mm-hmm. You share so much of your life in your writing and in your podcasting. Is there a limit to how much you'll share, or have you had any negative experiences from people knowing too much about you?
Now, Anne Lamott, who's a writer who I love, she said, like, you tell the truth, but you don't tell all the truth. Like, people don't know what they don't know. So I feel very comfortable about it. Yeah. I feel very, I've never felt like there's something that came out that made me feel uncomfortable.
All right, now I had 4 happiness quotes that I wanted to share and get your opinion.
Okay.
The fourth one was happiness is growth, because
that's great.
I think it's so apt.
Yeah.
This is the first one. The art of being happy lies in the power of extracting happiness from common things, and that is Henry Ward Beecher.
Yes. Yeah, no, I think that's true. Like finding happiness in our everyday lives is really important. Not expecting some special vacation or extraordinary event to make us happier, but to look for it in our everyday lives.
Being reasonably happy on a daily basis.
Yes, there you go. Reasonably. Nice. Yes. I should have gotten there myself.
This is Aeschylus. Happiness is a choice that requires effort at times.
Oh, for sure. Yes.
I'd never heard the second part of it, that requires effort at times.
Well, see,
and I think that's an important caveat.
That's the part I like the best, because it always confuses me when people say that happiness is a choice. I don't know. I just don't understand what they mean by that. Mm-hmm. Clearly, for people, it's very meaningful because people say that. To me, I just sort of doesn't make sense. But this idea that it requires effort, that you would do things deliberately thinking, I'm going to tackle feeling good, feeling bad, feeling right in an atmosphere of growth by doing things with my conscious thoughts and actions. That I completely agree.
That's your whole thing.
That's my whole thing. So I think it does take effort.
Right.
Yeah.
Happiness is not a goal, it is a byproduct. Attributed to Eleanor Roosevelt.
Oh, a million people have said this. John Stuart Mill said something. I really object to this because people.
Oh, good.
No, because they say I have like 10 different people saying it. I'm like, me or John Stuart Mill? Right. I think I'm right. But when people say things like that, and I said to them, well, what do you think you're aiming for? Like, what is it a byproduct of? They're like, I want to live a life of meaning and engaging with other people and just having gratitude for every day. And I'm like, what do you think it would look like to try to have a deliberately happy life? It's the same thing. I think that often the thing that people say it's a byproduct of are the very things that people would do to make their lives happier. So I don't see that as being a big distinction.
If you chose a synonym of happy to replace there, blank is not the goal. It's what would be a less objectionable goal? Contentment, exuberance, okayness,
Well, that's really hard. There's something like 15 or 17 academic definitions of happiness, and I never pick one because as a lawyer, I'm like, oh, I've been down that road with torts.
You know it when you see it.
Yeah, right. Yeah, I don't know. I don't feel like that's a very helpful framing myself. I feel like we're more likely to hit a target if we aim at it. So let's think about what we want and how might we move closer to it, rather than worrying about offshoots, and I don't know. I mean, it feels like a hard way to think about it. I always want to do it the most straightforward way. I'm like the Benjamin Franklin approach.
Which is?
Make a list, check it
right.
twice,
Yeah.
Keep
a scorecard.
Yeah, have some aphorisms.
Is that exhausting for people around you?
I don't know. Sometimes.
I was thinking about Jamie and some of these pursuits. Like
he does feel he's an innocent bystander. Yes. I call my sister my happiness guinea pig because she's more game for it than my husband. So she does get wrapped up into some of my experiments.
Jamie, I'm on your team.
Yeah.
All right, let's do fill in the blank and then we'll leave. The thing I love most about New York City is?
The New York City spirit. It's just like there is something really special about the spirit of New York City.
It's cool. It's a cool place to be. It's too damn cold.
Right now it is, yes. Yeah. But it will get too hot and then we'll complain about that.
That's true. The little thing, and that will not make it, well, the complaining will make us happy on some weird level.
Yeah.
The little thing my husband does that makes me happiest is?
Oh gosh, what a great question. Takes out the trash regularly. Yes, I never take out the trash.
He's a hero.
Yeah, he is a hero.
That's so romantic.
It's the little things, man. We've been married a long time.
The thing most people get wrong about happiness is?
They think that there's one right way, and instead of realizing, it's back to this idea of self-knowledge that we talked about before. Everybody has to figure out the way that works for them.
If I could do it all over again, I would change blank.
I think I would spend more time doing silly things with my kids when they were little.
That's a good answer.
Yeah.
One thing people can do every day to improve happiness is?
Go to bed on time.
That's it?
Yes. I think everything starts from a good night's sleep, and there's few things that a good night's sleep doesn't help. So, yeah.
My watch every morning says, congratulations, you hit your 8 hours of whatever. And then I said, does that count the 2 I spent staring at the ceiling, wondering about mistakes I made in 1986? Oh,
gosh. Well, must not. So that's good. Kidding. You get a gold star. That's right. Your watch is giving you a gold star when you wake up. I love it. I got to do that too.
Okay. I forgot to ask you this. Are you, given the challenges we and the next generation have with technology, are you bullish on happiness?
Yes.
What's the key to navigating around those devices?
Being the boss and not the servant. Taking control. Can I give a quick hack for people?
100%.
I love happiness hacks. So if you feel like you're being overwhelmed by your phone and you can't manage it, it's very easy. Go into settings and change your phone to grayscale, and then it will be in black, white, and gray instead of color. And it is much harder to use it, and it's much less enticing, and it's very easy to switch it back and forth. So if you need to look at a photograph or something, you can. But you will find it much easier to put down your phone.
Interesting.
And if you have a child who's always badgering you to use the device, change it to black, white, and gray, and just tell them that it's broken and you don't know how to fix it, and they won't be as interested in it, because color it makes it a lot easier to use these, and it makes them much more appealing. Try it in black, white, and gray, and it will be much easier to put it down.
You heard it from Gretchen Rubin.
That's right.
Lie to your child.
It's a little, yeah, right. Sometimes these things have to be done.
Gretchen, thank you so much. This has been a pleasure.
Oh, I'm so happy I got the chance to talk to you.
Oh, and take the Four Tendencies quiz.
Yeah, GretchenRubin.com/quiz. I got a lot of quizzes there. If you like a quiz, I got some really fun quizzes.
Links in the show notes. Thanks again.
Thank you.